Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm not going to shit all over the Epic Pass or the crappy deal that the Park City Ski Patrol Union settled on. Why? Because people who have Icon passes that go to Crystal Mountain have been emailing me just as pissed off as the Epic Pass holders who were emailing me last week, and I don't want to ignore them because they are my people too. And here is one of the many emails I received that outline the problems at Crystal Mountain. Last season, obviously with the Rona shit, reservations were required, pass holders were allowed 10, and it was a fucking refresh scramble just to get days for my 11-year-old daughter and I. Finally, the last few weekends were reservation free. All late spring, summer, and early fall, we got constant emails about renew now, tell your family and friends, lock in unlimited access type shit. Fast forward to now, and shit started off smooth. And of course, it gets busy. So last week, they sent out an email saying, due to popular demand, and to give the best-in-class experience, they said they were going to require reservations for all pass holders. Only 7 resis instead of last year's 10. Fast forward 3 days, due to negative feedback, and I'm guessing they've decided to change to parking reservations, and only 2 at a time. Like that's any better. I'm a single dad to a sweet, ripping girl just trying to provide her the dream and barely able to afford it. It's so worth it, but this is complete fuckery. So what this email tells me is that people spent their good money on Icon passes because they want to ski Crystal, and it's arguably the best mountain in Washington terrain-wise. And after a season full of frustration, traffic, and parking issues that have always plagued the mountain, they bought their passes with the idea that the reservation system was over, and people were psyched. Finally, Crystal would be back to normal, until it wasn't. Now, I know that they're trying, but the problem with this system is it rewards people who can sit around their computers all day and hit refresh. Think about the doctor or that food service worker who can't get away from work to sit in front of a computer for a solid hour to make their reservation because their jobs don't allow it. So they are penalized and they won't get parking, which really sucks for them. The solution Crystal has is busing people to the mountain from 30 minutes away. While in some years this would be acceptable, we are in a global pandemic, and Crystal is putting their guests at risk with this move. And imagine if you're that doctor who can afford to rent a place in Greenwater, which is really close to Crystal, but you couldn't get a parking reservation because you were in surgery all week and you didn't have time. Well, you're now supposed to drive your family 30 minutes down the mountain to the horse-loving town of Enumclaw to park your car and then get bused right back up to Crystal. It's a total joke, and it sucks for a lot of people. And to add insult to injury, the online parking system keeps going down, which has to be maddening. And I get it, I understand, people are trying to make things work. But when you've paid for lessons or you've paid for the free ride team on top of the couple grand you forked out for passes, this is not acceptable. I'm not sure what's happening at all the other Icon resorts, but if there are issues that are coming up, let me know. And while I hate this drama, I love it too because I didn't buy one of these passes. But that's enough complaining from me, because complaining is the last thing my guest this week would do. Josh Dueck has plenty of things to complain about, but you're only going to hear positive things from this incredible athlete. He's a true role model for not only up-and-comers out there, but to adults like you and me out there. Personally, if I could be a little bit more like Josh as a man, I'd be a better person. And while I've had so many inspirational figures come on this show, Josh is the inspiration to those dudes. He was a badass when he could walk, and he's even more of a badass after he's lost that ability to walk. And I'm not going to spoil anything else here. So before we jump into it with Josh, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram, and most importantly, please support my amazing sponsors who make this happen. They are the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, Alpine Vans, Stanley, and Elon Skis. And I should mention, Elon Skis made the first ever Glen Plake Pro model that is 104 underfoot, not 106 like I've previously said. I'm an idiot, but I'm happy to correct myself when I'm wrong. Now, it's time to jump into it with Josh Dueck. The Paralympics are right around the corner, and you are named the chef de mission. I don't know if I pronounced that right, nor do I care because you can correct me, but you were that for Canada. And I know it doesn't have to do anything with culinary arts. What is your role with Team Canada?
Dude, I'm cooking up a storm right now. I love it. Your enunciation's probably better than mine, Mike. Chef de mission. My counterparts, French-Canadian friends, probably cringe when I make my best effort. So I appreciate yours. Team captain. That role is firing on all cylinders right now. We're just making sure that the athletes feel supported and well taken care of as we kind of make this final little campaign into the games. The role is not really defined. Like when I applied for it, your application somewhat becomes a job description. So it's like, what does each individual candidate want to bring to the table? And for me, I thought unifying the team under one umbrella would be a pretty good starting point. So we came up with the creed: elevate, motivate, and unite. And looking at kind of our objectives above and beyond the field of play, like what are some of maybe our responsibilities to the general public, especially now during this really ridiculous time that we've all been living through the last couple of years. We feel just in general super fortunate that we still get to play sport, prioritize it, and excel in our fields. So that's one piece of it. Obviously, like the conversation around mental health becomes pretty topical these days. And so we behind the scenes have definitely been kind of plotting some different resources for supports leading into the games, because this big pause, like where nobody can do much right now, we're walking on eggshells to make sure that everybody stays healthy, so that they can get to Beijing in one piece in good health. And then after the games too, right? Because again, it's been such a strange time to travel and compete. And a lot of these events get canceled at the last minute. So it's like tons of lunchbox letdowns all the time for these kids. And so that mental health component becomes a pretty big part of it. And then how do we want to celebrate is perhaps like the third piece that we're really wrestling. Like, how can we bring Canada to Beijing without being able to, have the friends and families and sponsors there to have that party? And then how do we bring the experience back from Beijing so that all of our friends and family and sponsors in Canada can really rally around a campfire, if you will, and hoot and holler and make some noise? So we're just playing with what does that look like? And then I guess the last little piece, because I haven't been able to travel nearly as much as I would like to, because the dream was go visit all the athletes in their hometowns, help them with their rally cry, get to know them a little bit more. And maybe some chefs in the past have made that a priority. And I thought that would have been cool, but travel restrictions and all that stuff has limited our capacity. So I worked with my friends at Lululemon, and they helped me put together this cool little yoga video. And I've never done anything like that before. So it made me very uncomfortable to have a couple guys come into my house and film me doing a yoga practice with the intent of, again, unifying, motivating, elevating, and providing a nice grounding practice. Like when I was an athlete, I did yoga as a way to be strong, be dynamic, to take bigger hits, and to be able to train longer than everybody else. And now it's I need to do yoga every day, or at least a little bit of yoga every day to keep myself sane, because it's crazy times. Mike, I listen to your podcast all the time. You very well know how wild the world is that we live in. So it helps me keep on the straight and narrow the best of my ability and to be able to show up every day.
So it sounds like you're part therapist, part ringleader, and part deep meaning guy, like creating meaning for these athletes that go well beyond the Olympics or the Paralympics.
I like that summary. I haven't really summarized my role yet. Again, just trying to figure it out in real time and being fluid to the changes. But yeah, sure, I'll take it. I like that.
But before you can be the chef, you have to grow up, and you grow up in Kimberley, BC. And based on the backstories of people I know from there, I'm going to guess it's a pretty blue-collar place, and you weren't one of those skiers with a silver spoon in your mouth by any means.
No, not at all. And if anybody wants a real good kind of backstory, just check out your podcast with Trenton Painter. He was the generation before me and was definitely one of the icons that I grew up looking up to, even though I never knew him. He was already off and away doing his rad stuff that he did such a good job of sharing with you and in the audience a few weeks ago. And I like to look at Kimberley as we are tucked into the Rocky Mountain Trench. So there's three major mountains that come in there. There's the Rockies, the Purcells, and the Selkirks. And there's this little plateau, which is what Kimberley is built on. And the history of it is an old mining town. So yeah, it's a bit redneck, a bit blue collar. And that mine imploded, not literally, but figuratively shut down in 2000. And so the community itself had to reinvent. And it certainly, I think, made a good effort of reinventing towards outdoor adventure, recreation, activity. And it's growing in an amazing way. It's like every other kid, right? You grow up in your hometown. You're like, man, I got to get out of here, man. This place sucks.
Right.
Then you get out and you look back and you're like, dang, how lucky was I to grow up in such a cool mountain town that was very low key. Again, like you say, blue collar, low key, easy going.
And you say mountain town, but you weren't a guy getting into the mountains very early, it sounds like. It's not until age 11 you have a school field trip, and that changes your life. It made you fall in love with something, and you didn't have anything like skiing before. But You go on that trip, you find the freedom of skiing, and then you have to figure out a way to afford it and make it happen for yourself. Is that kind of how your ski story starts?
Yeah, you've definitely listened to my Chris Farley rants when I do my motivational talks. Yeah, it was a late start for me, high school field trip, and it afforded me that first opportunity to go slide down the mountain. And I was very convinced that's how I wanted to spend the rest of my life. And 25 years later, for sure, it's been a good run, but no silver spoon. My parents, they worked hard, but we certainly didn't have a lot of privilege growing up. My dad was a custodian, and my mom spent a lot of her time with disability, so she wasn't able to work a whole lot. So it was a struggle just to keep the lights on and food on the table. That forced me to be industrious.
So skiing was up to you. Like you had to make it happen.
For the most part. Throughout high school, yeah, absolutely. It was like collecting bottles from the neighborhood and returning them at the depot, getting a paper route, and then being a bag boy at the grocery store were the first 3 ways that I was able to earn a bit of money. I actually got like this wicked break, Mike, and it's just a ridiculous one, but I actually won a paper airplane contest and won a cool grand. And so I got the check for $1,000, and this is like circa mid-90s. It's a lot of money. Then I made the bank give me $1,000 bill. So they ordered it from the Bank of Canada and they sent me $1,000 bill. And then I went into the ski shop and pretty much blew 90% of it on a new pair of like Rossi skis and some rear entry boots. And I didn't know anything about what was going on. I got some pretty funny equipment, but it definitely got me moving in the right direction.
Dude, a paper airplane contest. I mean, I've heard of them in school where you're just trying to fly your plane further than someone else, but not for a grand. So that's pretty impressive right there. And to fast forward like 3 years or 3 years after you start skiing, you get yourself on the local freestyle team, and your crew back then, it's a who's who of Canadian mogul skiers, given they might not have been a who's who back then, but Miles Ricketts, Mark Abma, Ben Tipper, Dan Otero, and it was guys like that. They all came from the same situation, not rich, but really, really hungry to make the BC team and eventually the Olympics. Was that everyone's mindset when you started in the moguls?
A little bit, yeah. We were all surrounded by a great coach, Rob Kober, who instilled this strong work ethic and a standard of excellence that we all bought into. And so we just enjoyed that. And he was a bit of a strict disciplinarian, which I think we really needed at that time because we were a pretty unruly bunch from around the province. And we did have some pack leaders. And there's another fella in there, Chris Wong, who of our little cohort back in the day actually did make the Olympics from that BC team crew. So it's the old adage, right? If you have one person that's really excelling, it really brings the whole group up. So whereas like Dan and Chris and Miles and his brother Tyler Ricketts were like these incredible leaders for the program, super talented, it brought the rest of us up with them too. So we all ended up getting pretty good in that era of Rob Cobra and the BC team.
And one thing I think that might have been different with you than the rest of the mogul world was your punk rock look. I hear you had face piercings and you were an intimidating looking dude. What was your personal style back then?
I had no style. I was trying to fit in everywhere, Mike. I was a bit of a goof, that's for sure. But people said I looked a bit like Billy Idol. I definitely had some spiked hair and always in a bit of a fro. And I think at one point I might have had like 11 or more piercings in my face alone.
Whoa.
And so that definitely caught people off guard. But again, my parents were pretty strict and I grew up in a strong Christian home. And so the punk rock was a nice outward projection that I was making to startle people, but raised with good manners. So I was like that paradox. People would look at me and think that I was just a scumbag. And I always remembered to say please and thank you. And people, wait, pardon me. So I got a kick out of people's reactions as much as anything. I don't think I was nearly as punk as I wanted to be, but I definitely put on the show.
Yeah, I mean, if you have 11 piercings in your face, I can think that scares just about everybody up there in Canada.
It was shocking.
Back to skiing. The lifestyle is just as important as the skiing itself, I would think, especially back then. And you have a lot of talent, but as you got older, were you also partying your face off?
Yeah, for sure. That was a bit of my demise, but being on such a strong program with so many good athletes, like I think it's important to just flash back when I made the BC team. I didn't actually make the BC team. They had a squad of 10 and I was the 11th on the ranking list for the province. And so no jacket, no nothing. But they let me be, as they affectionately called it, the team bitch. And so I would do all the chores for the team, whether it's stepping out the course before the team arrived or shaping it up after the end of the day or downloading video or tracking results. So a lot of my day was spent doing a lot of admin and on-hill stuff in order to earn that spot on the team. And I say that because it's like my lack of ability, even though the team brought me up and I actually became a pretty strong mogul skier by the end of my 4 years on the program. I compensated all the time by being like, if I can't be the best on the mountain, I'm going to be the best shit disturber off the mountain. And so I definitely put a great effort into making noise. And a lot of that was in the bar or getting kicked out of the bar or things like that. So it was just a kid trying to fit in, really.
And that starts in 98 for you. And like you said, you were the bitch doing all the administrative stuff just to be with the team and be the fringe guy on the team. How does competitive mogul skiing actually end for you?
A mixed bag for sure. I had a dual mogul event against Jean-Luc Brassard, who was the Olympic champ.
I've seen the footage.
Yeah, even being beside him was like unbelievable, and actually giving him a run for his money. I think that surprised him as much as it surprised my coach and myself. I was like, actually, I'm going toe to toe. So in that sense, it ended pretty well. The other sense was I just couldn't afford to keep going. So like, it's a bit of that rags story where I literally was running too deep into debt and I couldn't keep up with the expenses. And so it was a heartbreaker for sure. I was super bummed out that just because I didn't have the dough, I couldn't keep going on. And that's just kind of how and why it ended. It ended on a really good note against the best in the world. So I get to remember that. But I was a little bit disappointed that I just couldn't make ends meet. That's for sure.
Yeah, it sounds really frustrating. And it's also the time, I think, when coaching starts for you. And is that something that's calculated? Like, oh, I guess I'll go coach now? Or how do you end up at Apex?
Yeah, it wasn't calculated by me by any measure. And again, back to Rob Kober being that stern and strict disciplinarian, he really encouraged all the athletes to diversify as much as we could, knowing that some of us might make our goals and aspirations for national team, World Cup and Olympics, and others probably not. And he also just wanted to give us an expanded lens on the sport. So encouraged us to take our judging courses, coaching courses, whether or not we ever wanted to do those pathways didn't matter. He just wanted us to know what it was about. And so when I was dealing with the dejection of not being able to make the team, then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to coach because that way at least I can keep my tools sharp. This was the time when the new Canadian Air Force was really blossoming. ABMA was doing his thing. Rex Thomas was off doing his thing. And everybody was like pushing the sport. Like guys that we knew from the day, like Anthony Bronowski, were like, okay, here it is. And I wasn't sure if that was going to be my lane, but coaching was a way for me to keep the tools sharp and stay involved. And I realized that I just love being in the mountains, and it wasn't about competing and it wasn't about being the best. There's an adage actually when you come into the Kootenays, there's a signpost that say the mountains shall bring peace to the people. And for sure that rings true in me in a big way. So coaching was an opportunity to be in the mountains. It brought peace to my soul, and I was able to share my passion with all these kids. And suddenly I was like, this is cool. Like, I don't know what kind of teacher I'll end up being, but I just get to be out here with these kids and help them achieve their goals. And, there's like some wicked kids at Apex when I first started there, like Stu Chapman and Matt Margette, who's now coaching the Canadian halfpipe team and went to the Olympics himself in Sochi. And so there's these little kids that I'm just hanging with and that were so rad. And it was a really good stepping stone. And Apex was awesome. Like, it's still one of my favorite homegrown hills that has this wicked family vibe. And it's definitely got a taste of the Wild West. Like, no matter how strange you want to be, somebody's been stranger. So you got nothing to worry about there.
And I think TJ and Bibby were kind of coming through there and jumping, but that was more of like, you weren't coaching them. You were more buddies with those dudes at that time.
Yeah. When I was coaching at Apex, for sure, I was kind of watching these rising stars really just take a rocket ship to the moon with what they were doing. And they were so innovative and so playful. And it was about a year later that I had an opportunity to, I wouldn't say coach them. They were on the program, but that was the year that Tej won the US Open. So like, as I entered coaching the Silver Star Club, they were exiting towards, well, it's in the history books now, like off to great things. They were off and away, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're off to change the sport. And when you get to Silver Star, you're coaching an incredible group of kids. Who's the kids that are on that Silver Star program?
That's a long list. And if I miss anybody, I'm sorry already, but you got the Riley Lebo, Marshall Talbot. Of course, Bibby and TJ were a part of it. The Schusters, Joe and Cam. And the list really goes on and on and on. What I remember is the kids being awesome and innovative and playful. But even more than that, what I was really drawn into is the community that the parents were building, right? Like, because all of their parents were there cheering their kids on. One guy had a shovel, the other guy had a snowblower, the mom had a camera, another one was coordinating this and that. And it was just like, that's how they were spending their evenings and weekends as a family. And I was like, this is a pretty great way to raise your kids. And just to be exposed to that, I was like, well, maybe one day I'll have a family and hopefully my family can be part of something as rad as this. Because I had a small family, Mike, and it was pretty dysfunctional. And so I saw all these other families creating community and I was like, heck yeah. So the kids were awesome. but it's their families that really, really drew me into the Silver Star Freestyle Club back in the day. And even today, like, that's who I hang with is their parents. I get to hear how these kids are doing by dinner with their folks.
So you've got something special going on at the Silver Star program. And when you're coaching these kids, I mean, they're on another level than you when it comes to tricks, because you were a mogul guy who's probably got some of the tricks, but these guys are pushing the sport, like you say, and being their coach, how do you make them better?
Authenticity and just calling it what it is. I'm like, you guys are way better than me. I don't even know what you're doing right now, but it looks so cool that here's what I can promise to you is like, I will make sure that the site is maintained how you need it. And so I understand traditional jumps, but you tell me what you need for jump shape, size, the angle of the lip on takeoff, landing hill. What do you need? And I'll deliver that. So that was my promise to them. And then their return to me was helping me understand the cool tricks that they were doing. And then I would help them with training in the gym to make sure they were strong for their pop so that they could take good hits when they didn't land their tricks well. And the basics of entry to the jump and landing was where I was able to provide a little bit of guidance. But what they were doing on takeoff and in the air, I was like, oh man, that is not a Daffy Twister spread. What are you doing right now? And it's like, well, we're working on it. We're trying to figure it out too. I'm like, keep going, keep going.
And nowadays you're a parent, and you didn't know the feeling of being a parent back then. But when you look back when you're 23, 24, and you're coaching these guys, did it feel like those were almost your kids, or were you almost the fun uncle?
With the older kids, I definitely probably played fun uncle a little bit. And that's how I was raised as well. We had a lot of fun uncle coaches, and I like how you put that. But some of them for sure parents, right? Some of the younger kids, I definitely took on a bit of the parent role because I could see a little bit of me in them where they were looking up to the Ricketts and the Wongs and the Oteros like I was, and the Trennans and the Jim Sheemans, and looking up at these really, really talented athletes and trying to figure out where you belong in the mix. So those younger athletes, I maybe did take a parent role and help them overcome some of their fears and some of the barriers and to see them through to wherever they wanted to go in the sport. Because there was like a pretty significant range of kids, right? Like the TJs, which we all know, to the younger cousins, brothers, sisters, etc., that come down the line that were in it, but they were at a different level. So I played both roles. That's a great question, Mike. I like that.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out with the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. Not only do they make the Northwest's best beers, but if you haven't tried their clean line seltzers or cocktails in a can, well, you're missing out. And you can try just about everything at their Denver, Portland, Boise, and Bend-based pubs. Really, 10 Barrel specializes in everything that I think is fun: skiing, snowboarding, biking, and drinking beer outside. And from supporting a world-class team of athletes that includes Lucas Walks, Ejack, Curtis Cizek, Kate Zelef, Carson Storch, and Ben Ferguson, they also create countless events and host their own, like their epic Pray for Snow parties. On top of that, they give back to causes like Protect Our Winners. They have supported this podcast for years, and to celebrate that, next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of 10 Barrel and drink it outside. For more on everything 10 Barrel, head on over to 10barrel.com. Next up is Elon Skis, and I've told you before how much fun I'm having on my Ripstick 96 Black Edition. And for the past decade, I've skied a wider ski because that's what I thought people did in the Northwest. And I've had a blast on my Ripstick 106. But when it's hard and fast out there, the 96 is so much more fun. That carving sensation, well, I feel it a whole lot more, and I'm hooked on the more narrow-waisted ski. And being that these skis are made in Elon's best-in-class factory in Slovenia, the quality of my skis is visibly better than anything else on the wall. Next time you're at a place that you can demo some skis, try something out of the Ripstick line, and you will be sold on Elon just like I am. They are so good, and they're always good times. To find out more about the skis, message me or check out elonskis.com. And last but definitely not least is Alpine Vans. Alpine Vans is your one-stop shop for your dream adventure mobile. If you haven't checked out the Cody Townsend van video on their homepage, watch it, and you're going to see why Alpine Vans are leaps and bounds ahead of the competition, which is why they only have 2 vans left to build out this season. And they have big, big plans for next year. So if you want to get one of those 2 vans that they have left, well, head over to alpinevans.com and fill out their thoughtful quote builder and questionnaire. While I can't guarantee you'll get one of the last 2 practical, durable, easy-to-use vans that they have in stock, it's worth a try. And if you don't get one, I recommend holding out for next fall. And that's all I can really say because Alpine Vans has big plans, but they won't let me tell you about them until the fall. So check out Alpine Vans, see what they're able to do, and hold tight until you can get your hands on one of those vehicles. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. What's huge for all of these guys is Canadian Nationals. And when you're getting them ready for it, you're building a jump that these guys are going to train on, and you're going to be the guy that guinea pig the jump. And to figure out these jumps, there's no math. It's all feel and experience. And before we talk about this specific time, does it happen a lot where you build a jump and it's just completely wrong, like too much kick or not enough transition?
Yeah, for sure. Like the person that does have to guinea the jump is always exactly that, a guinea pig, and you do your best to evaluate speed to match it up with the distance to the landing hill, etc. In this case, I got to kind of straighten it out. I was not guineaing the jump. The jump had already been set. I had shaped it up the night before. The kids were already there doing laps with actually a master coach, Brett Wood. That name might have come up with Bernowski, I think Woody. And so Woody was running the show that day, and I arrived a little bit later on because I was on the mogul venue to start the day off. And Woody is like, yeah. So like he came, he saw through me. He saw me do a warm-up lap to do a speed check to come into the jump, and it was a bit slow, and he saw I was setting for the Superman front flip, and Woody looked at me and he's like, dude, whatever you do, do not launch a front flip. He's like, I've taken the lip off this jump. The way the kids are skiing it today is like, you just do something else. And again, that a bit of a defiant one that lives deep inside of me was like, I built this jump. This is my house. And like, what a stupid thing to do to the master. Like Woody is Yoda, and young Luke Skywalker and me basically just fucked right up. And I often talk about, if you've heard me tell the story, about the effect that it had on the kids, but I rarely touch on the effect that it had on Woodrow. And it was serendipity, Mike, like maybe 2-3 years ago now. And I hadn't seen Woody in like 15 years. I hear this voice, and I'm riding my bike around the valley trails in Whistler, and I hear this voice, yo, Dueck. Only one person has that tone in their voice, and it was Woody. And I just like pumped the brakes on my bike, and I look back and I'm like, Woody? He's like, Dueck. And I just started bawling my eyes out, Mike, and I'm not super emotional. And I just started crying, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, I'm so sorry. Like, dude, I'm so sorry. And he's like, it's okay. And I'm like, you know why I'm sorry? And he's like, I know why you're sorry, dude. And we just literally hugged it out. He was on his way to work. I was on my way to meetings. No more than 5 minutes of just two grown men sitting there having a cry in the forest. And that's the last I saw Woody again. It's been a couple of years. And so there's a lot to this story, and that's a part of it that doesn't really get told that often, is like, no, I wasn't the guinea that day. I did something really stupid. I think we all know that. But I was actually told straight up what I was about to do was a bad idea. And then I basically pointed the middle finger at the master and did it anyhow because I had to be the defiant one. Nobody tells me what to do. So then there's the other part of the story that people know well. I did come in too fast. My gut check was like, oh, buddy, don't do this, as well as the wisdom of the master. And I do it anyhow because I think I'm punk as fuck, but really I'm just dumb as fuck. And go off the jump, and you've seen the footage, you know, I overshoot the landing hill. I over-rotate the front flip, and I wake up in a pretty big mess with all the kids huddled around me. And so that was like obviously a very big part of it, as I realized that my mistake that day had a pretty significant ripple effect on everybody.
It does have a ripple on everybody, but when you come to, or when you're on the ground right there, is there pain or is there confusion? Or do you just realize things are really, really bad based on the look on everybody else's face?
No physical pain at the onset. There's shame for sure. I was embarrassed. And, you know, when everybody's kind of like looking down at you and you know you've made a really dumb mistake, you kind of just want to get out of the awkward.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. And so that really like struck fear. It went from shame to fear real quick. Like, I can't move. And it just felt like somebody was holding me down. And I was like, this sucks. Like, I can't move. I'm pinned to the ground. And everyone's like, don't move. And then levity comes out. I try to kill it with humor. And I'm like, oh, don't worry. I can't move. Ha ha ha. Oh, fuck. And then the ski patroller, Alethea, I can't believe I remember her name. She looks and she kind of smiles at me. She's like, now's not the time for humor. And I'm like, had I only known it would have taken this to make you smile, I would have done this a long time ago. She couldn't believe it. She actually came to the hospital a few months later to be like, are you for real? I'm like, I was for real. But anyhow, it was heavy, right? There was shame, there was fear, there was guilt, there was a little bit of levity. And then when they actually got me onto the backboard, Mike, it sucked for sure. Because then now suddenly the shards of bone in my spine and the nerves, they were colliding, and it was super uncomfortable.
And I mean, your life has been an athlete from the time you were a teenager, and then you're coaching elite athletes. So this is the worst fear. before your accident, if you had a choice of dying on a jump or being in a wheelchair for the rest of your life, you'd have to think about that answer for a while, I would think.
No, not even a second. I definitely would have wished death over disability. It's funny that you bring that up. I ran into a kid a couple of nights before. He was at the liquor store. He's in a wheelchair. I'm walking in, and I couldn't even dignify his existence. I felt awkward looking at him. I was like, oh God, what a shitty life. And then I kind of like looked away, and then I left, and I was just like, if I was ever in a wheelchair, I'd kill myself for sure. That's how I felt. Just ignorance, right? Like just such an idiot kid. But like, I just didn't know. I didn't know anybody in a wheelchair. And I just thought, wow, disability, that's such a limited way to experience life. Like, who would want that? And obviously, when it happened to me, like less than a week later, my take on it was quite different than how I felt in that moment.
For sure. And I think a lot of people have that kind of thought until they experience or see friends or people they're close to experience something like that. And then their perspectives change. But when you get into the hospital and they've gotten you off the mountain, they get you into the hospital, are you in the loop of everything that's going on with the medical professionals? Or do they just take charge and do what they can to put you back together?
There was a bit of a loop in the GP at the local hospital. When he looked at the x-rays, it was pretty clear to him. Dr. Smart was like, oof, okay, he's dislocated his back. He severed his spinal cord, and that will be permanent paralysis. And his kids were in the junior program, so I didn't know his kids super well at the time, but I definitely ran into Dr. Smart a couple of times throughout the coaching term. And yeah, he comes in and he knew what he had to do. He had to tell a 23-year-old kid that life was going to be abruptly different. And he did it in a magical way. And he's basically just said, you know what, Josh, you're going to rock the world from a wheelchair. And before you know it, you're going to be back in the mountains riding a sit ski with all your friends. And like in an instant, he dropped the hammer. Okay, wheelchair, rest of my life. Okay, that was my worst fear realized. But I'm going to be back in the mountains, which, as I said earlier, it's a place that brings me peace and with all my friends, right? And I've always been striving for community. And he gave me so much in one fell swoop that it made the rest of the journey palatable, which meant going to Vancouver, having a crazy surgery on my back, which took like 9 hours after like almost 2 days in the waiting room of just, that was excruciating. If you ever read a Dr. Seuss with your kids, you know, there's no place worse to be than in the waiting room. It just, people just waiting. And so you're waiting and you can't move and you're uncomfortable. And there's this fear of the unknown and you just want the surgery to happen, and it does. And you get out of surgery and that's a whole new world of hell. The emotional, physical pain just compounding was pretty tough. And then it is what it is, right? Then you just keep driving forward.
Yeah, I can imagine the mental pain is just ridiculous because you've looked at yourself as this super athlete your whole life and that's taken away. But it sounds like with the way that the doctor told you and the way that you are as a person, you're able to deal with that in some respect that's decent. But the physical pain, what is that like? Because I read somewhere that you told your dad that you wanted to pull the plug at some point because it was so painful.
Yeah, probably. Being with my parents in that moment was really tough. I saw all their dreams dissolve and that fucked me right up. And so I think I was probably feeling a lot of things, and there was a lot of drugs going through my system to try and keep the pain at bay. But they were giving me something akin to like a horse tranquilizer, and I could hit that drip every 7 minutes. It was almost like, you know, when you're really warm on a summer's day and you take a drink of cold water, you can feel it go down your throat.
Yep.
It was like that painkiller. As I hit the trigger, I could feel my body relax for probably 5 or 10 seconds. And then it was just watching the clock for another 6 minutes and 50 seconds until I could pull the trigger again. And it's hard, right? And I don't even know if I can remember it well because trauma fucks you right up. I just remember it was for sure real bad. Everything was busted. And then there's also just the fear of what next. Yeah, my parents had to wear a lot. They held a lot of space for me in those early days. And I can't even imagine what that would have been like.
And then it sounds like another shining light other than your parents is your girlfriend at the time, Lacey. She quits her job to be by your side. And between her and your parents, is that what gives you hope and a reason for being?
Yeah, my parents gave me reason to fight for sure. My dad's probably the toughest human I know. He never really complained about much. He's just an old farm boy and had a real tough life himself. So complaining about my pain wasn't really an option. Obviously, it hurt a lot and it got pretty dark. And Lacey did come into my life, and you got the most of the story right. I wanted her to be my girlfriend, but she was playing hard to get. And I was also that deviant shit disturber that, you know, I give her credit for not jumping into a relationship with me because I think the writing was on the wall that something might happen. And so her spidey senses were like, you know what, this guy is neat, but I'm not quite ready to fully engage. But when my accident happened, she did drop everything in her world and bought a one-way ticket to the hospital and didn't know what she was going to do. She just knew she had to be there for a friend. And a week later, I think she started to see through all of the surface activity that I was all about, trying to shock value everything. And she met a lot of good friends. And I consider that like a bit of the TSN highlight reel. And she got to know me through them. And she's like, geez, this guy's pretty decent, actually. And then she like looked at me and she's like, are you going to ask me out? And I'm like, holy shit. Like, how many times have I asked you out? And you said no. I'm like, this is not the time for games. And she's like, just try one more time, see what happens. And well, the rest we know, right? 17 years later, we got 2 kids. And, it's a lot of my successes in sport and a lot of my introspection in life is owed to somebody who's as strong as her. She's a warrior, and I'm very, very fortunate to have somebody as strong as her by my side to be there and reflect with and push me forward. Because she's a champion athlete, Mike. I'm a bit of the all-in, experience as much of life as I can. And she was always like, stay the course, wake up early, set your alarm, get ready for training. And I'm like, okay. And I think I've heard Bushy say this a few times. But it's just like, all the crazy stuff that he did was always an effort to impress Sarah in the early days. And so like a lot of the things that he was doing, like that switch double backy that he dropped in MSP, like I've heard him say that like that was a moment that he was hoping to catch Sarah's attention. And he fucking caught the world's attention with that. Which, man, you the man. But a lot of my effort in the arena of sport was to impress my girl. She gave me hope, she gave me strength, and she gave me love. And shit, well, like I think that's a pretty good explanation to why my story was as robust as it was for that chapter of time when I was playing sport.
And I will say that we're not going to talk about her much in the podcast, but it's safe to say that without her, there is no Josh as we know him today. So I wanted to make sure that we brought her up because she's the backbone of everything that you do, it seems like. And overall, your physical recovery is pretty fast, it seems like. It's like you're out in under a year, which seems incredible to me. But the mental part, I wouldn't be surprised if you use booze or drugs or anything to cope with your situation, but you're such a positive dude. Did you have those dark times right after everything happened?
Yeah, just what it is, man. I've had dark times my whole life, well before my accident. It's just kind of part of my pre-wiring in my brain, I suppose. So it wasn't new in that sense.
But it was fun before, right? And this was coping.
Yeah. And the substance for sure. Again, I think if I didn't have a light and a rock in my life, such as Lacey, I'd be dead or in jail for sure, because I was sending her pretty hard.
And how about how others react to you? Because you mentioned that when you saw that guy in the wheelchair, you looked at him when he was at the liquor store and you're like, I would never want to be that guy. But can you look in other people's eyes, like the athletes that you've coached and everything, and just tell that they feel sorry for you? And it almost makes you feel like, oh, fuck, man, I don't want to make them feel bad.
Actually, that's such a good question. One, Dr. Smart, again, the day after my accident, called a town hall with all the athletes and coaches that were at the Junior National Championships, which is the event that I was about to coach before my injury. And he did a town hall and brought in a great human being by the name of Sonia Gaudet, who was on her way to the Paralympics in Torino, and brought Sonia in. And Sonia basically said, here's the deal, right? He's had an injury. He's still going to be the same guy. He's just going to get around different. And even though he gets around different, he's going to be able to do a lot of the same things that he did before. It's just going to take a bit of effort and adaptation. And so all the kids are like, oh, okay. Because I certainly wasn't the first person in the ski community to have a spinal cord injury, but like it was one of the most visible stories and one of the first injuries, I think, in the sport that I'm aware of. And so there became a bit of a lightness to it. And the second thing that happened is Lacey played, let's say, the door person at the hospital and basically said, Josh is doing really good right now in his room. He would love to see you, but really we just want to focus on what is and where we're going and not go in there with too much. I'm sorry this happened. You didn't deserve this. So she was a bit of a firewall before people even came in. And then, of course, the buffer that Dr. Smart had built created this really interesting atmosphere. And I would consider any big trauma in our life to be like a bit of a nuclear explosion. And it can go either way, right? It can spiral downwards and be really deep and dark, or it can spiral up. And so the kids were looking at me, take it on the chin, for lack of better words, and just find a way to drive forward because, I had hope and I had love. And so it was genuine, right? This is actually one of the first chapters in my life that I didn't deal with significant depression and dark thoughts on a regular basis, or constantly go back to the bottle or other things like that as a form of therapy. It was probably one of the happiest moments of my life. Fuck. Think about that. Right after I break my back and I lose my ability to walk. And I'm actually in this really genuinely positive space and moving forward. So the kids saw that and they're like, whoa, this is awesome. And I see the kids and I'm like, whoa, they are awesome. And then we just kept doing this. And Joe's dad, Joe Schuster, so Dangerous Don, came to the hospital at 3 weeks. Classic Schuster. He's like, hey, do you want to come to the BC championships? All the kids are going to be there. And after missing you at the junior nationals, man, they would sure love to see you at the provincial champs. I'm like, yeah, sure. Meanwhile, thinking there's no way in hell that the doctors are going to let me out of the hospital 3 weeks post surgery. I was like, sure, I'll entertain the idea, Don. Meanwhile, thinking there's no way. And the doctor's like, actually, you're making some pretty good progress with your partner, Lacey here. I trust her to be acting as your nurse for the next couple of days. And if you just take it easy, I think it'll actually be good for your mental health to get out of here for a couple of days. And we'll see you on Monday. And I was like, my jaw hit the floor. Like, what the hell? Like, I didn't leave the hospital, never mind getting to a minivan with Dawn and drive 5 hours to the interior and go to this event. And it changed things dramatically. That one little move, that one little offer that Dawn made brought me to the championships. And then I was able to hand out awards and go to the judges stand and call a few tricks and even get on a snowmobile, which was a bit ridiculous. And then hobble my way back to the hospital to finish my time in the intensive care and then finally into rehab. So that was like another big turning point where the kids were like, he's going to be okay. Like, holy shit. And I'm like, I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, I'm going to be okay. Like, I don't know how I'm going to ski again, but like I was back to the mountains. I was back with my people. That was a pretty significant turn for sure. And so it was the opposite. We're all spinning up in a really good way.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start out with the Seattle brand that has been around since 1913. I'm talking about Stanley, and they invented the category of keeping things hot and cold. Sure, there are a ton of overpriced copycats out there, but no one delivers the quality and, most importantly, the ability to keep things hotter or colder for longer than Stanley. I use the water bottles and pint glasses on a daily basis, and on weekends, their food storage solutions are perfect for all the foods you bring to eat at your local ski area. And while I know this won't last forever, the best deal you're going to find on any Stanley products anywhere comes through my podcast. I'm going to save you 30% off everything Stanley. All you need to do is go to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and when you check out, enter the one-word code DRINKFAST to get that deal. If you spend $75, I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. My final sponsor is Peter Glenn Ski and Sports. They've been getting people dialed with gear for over 60 years, and they always have a cool contest on their Instagram page. This week, they're teaming up with Anon and giving away a pair of M4 Toric goggles and a pair of WMF3 MFI goggles to one lucky male and female winner. With Anon's innovative Magnatech lens system, which uses the power of magnets, swapping out lenses is easy, just like entering this contest. Here is what you need to do to win some goggles. First, go to Peter Glenn Sports on Instagram and follow both Peter Glenn Sports and Anon Optics. Second, like the giveaway post from Anon. Third, tag 2 friends in the comments. It's that easy. The giveaway ends on January 28th, and the winner will be announced then. For all your other gear needs, head on over to peterglenn.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. It sounds like Abma treated you exactly the same, like even towing you behind his truck to strip bars, like he just treated you like a regular Josh.
Whoa, yeah, that's true. It was pretty funny. We were having a really good time, and I thought that would be the fastest route from point A to point B. Then, of course, Lacey's voice of reason is yelling, "Don't do this, Mark! What are you doing? This is crazy!" And he stops. He's like, "Don't worry, Lacey." And then he throws me a sled helmet. He's like, "We'll put a helmet on him." And I was definitely, my general MO really is fast and loose. Until I became a dad, I think a lot of what I did was fast and loose. And I feel for my parents for what I put them through, because there was not a lot of fucks given, and there was not a lot of fear in the decisions I was making. I was just giving her.
That's a great way to live. And I think everybody's story with paralysis is different. And I hate to get personal, but it's something that I'm always interested in for some reason. And I don't know why, but everybody's story is different. And I always wonder, after an injury like yours, like, are you able to pee and poop and have sex and do all that kind of stuff?
Buddy, these are the best questions, and I'm really delighted you're asking them, because a lot of people shy away from them unless you're like in a kindergarten class, and then those kids ask you at least about pee and poo. The other one they might not ask straight away, and if they do, they've probably got some checks and balances at home. But no, I appreciate the integrity of that question. No, that's the most challenging part about being disabled. Wheelchair is a challenge when you hit sand and snow, but the rest of it is actually kind of fun. I don't mind it at all. Well, okay, maybe stairs suck too. That's a real thing.
Yeah.
Nope, I have to catheter all the time. And for a long time, I was incontinent. So I'd pee my pants all the time. And so I'd have to wear a leg bag and I would smell like an outhouse all the time because the leg bag would fail and you'd be covered in your own piss. And to the point of how much that bothered me, Mike, right after I had put down the winning run in Sochi, I was still kind of tense and not really happy until I was able to get out of my sit ski and check that I didn't piss my pants. Like it really upset me that much. And maybe it shouldn't have, but it did. And luckily, about 3 years ago, I had a surgery done, which is alleviated the incontinence part, but I still have to use a catheter to go pee. So that's, you're jamming a big straw right through your urethra to empty your bladder. So that's tough. Bowels is even more nasty, dude. To the audience, if you don't want to hear this, then maybe now it's time to just unplug for a second. But it's like picking your nose. And so I've got to digitally stimulate myself. So I ended up jamming my hand up my butt and pulling the poop out. And it's weird. It's uncomfortable and it's never going to be easy. It just, I kind of put on the blinders when I have to do that. And it is what it is. Everybody's different. Everybody's different, Mike. Everybody's story is different. Some people go on their own, which is great. And some people have even more invasive practice in order to let that part of their body function. And then the big one, the big juicy one, which is sex. It was a challenge for sure. I couldn't figure out the right concoction of prophylactics to make things work the way I wanted them to. So there was a lot of disappointments for me and probably understanding from Lacey's camp for probably the first 10 years, because there was not a lot of education out there. There's not a lot of people that I could talk to. Like the High Fives Foundation didn't exist, where guys like Roy Tuscany have built a community for us to go around. And about 7 or 8 years ago, I figured out a life hack that's actually made things incredible. And I don't want to say better than before my accident, but in that department, I figured out the concoction for the prophylactics to make it work and not last too long and not be too soft. And then, going to a lot of therapy and, learning to connect with my body in a subtle way has kind of built a tantric component to that department. So I'm very fortunate that I've been able to practice and play and have a steady partner that's been willing to go through the journey with me. But it took a long time to figure that one out. And that was filled with shame and guilt and sadness. And so dope questions, dude. Real good questions. People need to hear it because it's not just about being in a wheelchair. It's those three things are probably the most detrimental or hard for a person to manage or overcome with a spinal cord injury.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And another thing that really intrigues me or is interesting to me is that nowadays your arms are your legs. Like your upper body strength has to be unreal these days.
Yeah, you would think, everybody says that. And I'm sure that pound for pound, I'm probably pretty wiry, but I've always been a skinny fat kid. And a little bit of like my understanding is if you have an injury or you're born with a disability prior to your growth curve in puberty, then your upper body really does become your lower body. So your shoulders become more like hip sockets. Your arms become these giant, that dude from Family Guy kind of character.
Yeah.
For me, I was 23, so my growth was done. My arms are my arms, and I have to be mindful of what I ask of them. And so I'm always asking a lot, but I also know when to kind of pull back if my wrists or my elbows are starting to bugger up, because you basically got so many pushes in your life before you end up maybe having to find a different way to get about. So I challenge the body as much as I can. I stress it as much as I can, but I also, hence the yoga, back down and find a way to really listen to my body when I need to. Because I banged it up pretty bad where I can't even pull up my underwear, Mike. And that's like a pretty depressing spot to be when you bust an arm or a shoulder and you can't draw your own underwear up and you're really feeling a different level of vulnerability for sure.
Well, I would say, anybody who breaks an arm would have trouble pulling their underwear up. But if you break your arm, it means you can't go anywhere. It's like an arm, a shoulder, a hand, a finger. That impacts your mobility completely because your arms are your legs.
True that. Yeah. You can't get into the chair, out of the chair, onto the toilet, into bed. Kind of somebody will put you in the spot and then you're kind of there until somebody's ready to get you out of it. Humbling, for sure, humbling.
Yeah. And then everything in your world, too, needs to be adapted to your new life. Like, how long does it take you to retrofit your house, your car, and get all the things that you need to get back to the life you used to live?
Well, I'm pretty stubborn that way. I actually chose not to retrofit the house very much at all. Otherwise, I felt like I'd never want to leave. And knowing that I wanted to travel the world, I wanted to make my home life as, I don't want to say difficult as possible, but minimize any accommodations to it so that I constantly had to innovate and problem solve and overcome barriers that were in front of me. So it's like kind of a constant workshop at home. So that's one thing. But the car is another thing for sure. We're pretty lucky. We've got these hand control things that somebody came up with. And so you just pull down on the lever and it hits the gas pedal and you push forward on the same lever and it hits the brake. And that's certainly an innovation that I've adopted early on and absolutely love driving.
To retrofit the car and stuff like that, is all that stuff really expensive? Like, how do you pay for all the things that you need to pay for to get life going again?
I'm one of the fortunate, as somebody once said, you're the luckiest of the unlucky. There's certainly nothing lucky about having a disability. But when I say the luckiest, I got hurt at work. I was coaching. And so that's kind of the gold standard for support, at least in BC.
Yeah.
If you get hurt at work, workers' compensation is there for you, and they've been really good. They cover all of my wheelchairs, catheters, hand controls. 20 years later, I've moved into a family home, which has 2 floors. So they put in a platform lift to get me from my main floor down into my basement. So all these barriers that come with the disability are absorbed. And so I feel super fortunate about that. It's expensive, as you said, and because I think insurance companies are typically the primary purchasers of a lot of this stuff. Those that don't have car insurance from their injury or workplace stuff, it's hard, man. It is. I see it, and it is brutal. And I definitely try to share the wealth when and where I can and provide supports or just opportunities like with sports equipment so people that can actually experience it. And that's where, again, I love Roy Tuscany and what he's done at the High Fives, because when insurance says no, the High Fives Foundation says yes. And so he's filling that void in such a massive way. And bless Roy Tuscany and all of the people that work with the foundation, because he's got a great team of people that bridge the gap for so many that need it.
They do some amazing things, but getting back to your life, and your life is really all about skiing. 2005 is the year you're going to get back into the mountains. And the first few times that you're out, is it a mix of happiness and frustration? Like you're back where you belong, but you don't know what you're doing?
No clue what I was doing. I just went in with head down and I'm going to figure this out. And then I arrived at the parking lot at Apex and I couldn't get out of my car. The snow was so deep. And I was like, oh boy. And then I sat into the sit ski and I'm like, oh my God, how do I balance on this thing? And it was like, there was no cushion in the seat. So I was like, I can't get a pressure sore from sitting in this hard seat. So I was like stuffing toques and gloves in there, and it was a Genki belt. And I was like, ah. And so it went from I can do this to holy shit, what have I got myself into? And the first 3 days were well supported. Lacey was there. My buddy Brian was there. And then this old guru, his name was Mike Coburn. He had been in a wheelchair for a long time, was there to kind of show me the ropes. And the first couple of days were brutal and very, very scary and frustrating, because I was like, I should be able to figure this out. I was a coach and a skier and I know the mountains, and it took a bit, but we finally broke through. And literally by breaking through, Brian was shadowing me with some bike handlebars that he bolted onto the seat to provide me that support and that balance that I needed to give confidence. And I was making some good turns knowing that he was shadowing me. And then finally I made too good of a turn and broke the handlebars off, and we both kind of cartwheeled down. He's like, buddy, this is like your bird coming out of the nest moment, dude. You've got to ski down. It's cold, -30. It's getting dark. You have to get to the lodge. And I'm like, fuck. It was like a pretty steep blue square. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was take flight or fall. And I took flight. And then that was pretty much light switch moment. I like to read terrain. I love to find my way down the mountain. And it was go time from that moment on.
And eventually things progress to where you start to get into racing, or racing's put on the table as something that you can do, which is exactly the opposite of everything you've been about your whole entire life. It's been more about the freedom and the expression of skiing. I mean, I guess in the moguls it was competitive, but it's a different thing to be a ski racer in spandex. How tough of a pill was that to swallow at first? I'm going to be everything I didn't want to be.
I was pretty ignorant to ski racing, so for sure I was definitely put off. And I went with the adage, spandex is a privilege, not a right. And I certainly didn't want to be putting my skinny legs in those tight pants. And I wasn't sure about the whole racing culture as well, because I was pretty removed from it. And you're right, it was counterculture. So my hand wasn't forced, but there was this lovely lady, Sean Blythe, who was doing some recruiting for the provincial team, and definitely saw my resume and thought that I might be somebody worth investing in. And so she really pushed it. And I'm like, no, Sean, no, Sean, no, Sean. And then she's like, there's a race coming to Silver Star. There's some of the best athletes from North America and even some from Japan that are going to be racing here. Why don't you just go hang out in the start hut and see what you see? And I was very intrigued by the equipment that they might be using. And I was like, okay, I could probably get a couple little life hacks from these guys. And I went up there and then I was like, you know what? I'll do fine in this race. And then I ended up running this race. And I put down a heater. Like I laced one up and I got to the bottom, dude. And I'm like, yeah, like racing's super fun. They put fences up, they got patrol here, and now I just get to point it. And when you have no perspective, you have no idea how bad you really are sometimes. And I was like, I looked at the result sheet. I'm like, not page 1, not page 2, not page 3. Jesus. I was like dead last by a mile. And I thought I put down a heater, right? And I was like, oh, so then that literally just triggered my competitive fire. And I just like quickly did the math. I'm like 5 years out from the Vancouver 2010 Paralympic Games. That was always my goal, was to make it to the top level. And I never really knew how that was going to shake out. I thought maybe freestyle, maybe moguls, maybe the new school kind of thing. But I'm like, really, if I get over all of my shit and just realize that my goal was to be a skier and to wear the maple leaf, I'm like, dude, it's right in front of me. And so then I basically lit the bridge on fire and didn't look back. I was like, here we go. And I'm glad that I did. I'm glad that Sean was there to push me to that first race. I'm glad that I got schooled, and I got schooled for years. And being last at a lot of races is not a ton of fun, but you either crumble under it or you find a way to be a little bit better. And so that forced a ton of innovation, and it was just the right time too, right? The games are coming to Canada, so there's a ton of support. So I was able to express all of my creativity and curiosity in a well-supported environment with coaches and engineers. And that's a big part of why I was successful.
And I would think with your go for broke mentality and everything that you've done your entire life, there's going to be some really gnarly crashes that happen on the race course. What's the worst experience you've had in ski racing?
Well, the one that really comes to mind when you say that was I was in not La Molina, it was Torino. It was on the Olympic course. And it was, I'm going to estimate between 100 and 110 kilometers an hour. I just was about to high side. Like, so I was off my carving edge and I was on a flat ski, and you're kind of just fucking floating and you're like, ha, 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 ha. And then I just looked at the fence and I'm like, bring it on, motherfucker. And then I went into the fence and the paint, and it worked out. You know, I didn't get too badly mangled, but it certainly was a shocking experience for everybody that was on site, because it took a while to peel me out of the third layer of fence. So it was like getting a bullet shot through a wall. That was one of them. I don't know. I'd probably taken a few dingers as well, where I ended up, you know, kind of seeing some stars, or I body checked the snow pretty hard in New Zealand, and that ended up fracturing my arm, which was probably the most consequence for sure. Like that put me out for the longest.
I mean, that's got a huge impact on your life when you fracture your arm. But what's crazy to me is that within 3 years, you go from the coach of the future of skiing to injured to Canadian sit ski champion. And then the next year you make the World Cup circuit. And while you were a badass in Canada, how humbling was it being on the World Cup that first year?
Very. There was a couple things that worked in my favor. The national championships that I won, there was a lot of better skiers than me, but there was like this crazy hometown vibe. First time that a lot of my friends, teachers, all these people from Kimberley were there. And I knew that run. Again, I like to read terrain. I knew that run inside and out. So even though I didn't know much about ski racing, I knew the dreadnought. I knew the rollers, and I was hungry for it, and I pinned it, and it worked out. And so, yeah, I did get an early opportunity to be Canadian champ, and that filled me full of confidence. And then I got onto the World Cup, and that was smashed. The courses are way harder. Everything's beat up, and there's a lot of talent. I certainly didn't see that coming, how thick the field was and how many great racers there were. And they've been doing it for a long time. So it was like humble pie for a year. And I'm surprised that I persevered through it, because it sucked. Like racing's hard. Sucking is even harder. And it was like sucking week after week after week. And then came back that summer and kind of regrouped. And again, lots of opportunity being a Canadian during that window coming into the games. And I fully exploited every opportunity there was.
Well, you figured it out that summer, because it's like you come back and in 2009, you're the world champion. And then the next big goal for you, like you said, is the Paralympics in Whistler, and a pinnacle moment for any athlete. And to have it in your backyard is so exciting. But is it super nerve-wracking when you get to an event and be on that big of a stage where you've never been to anything like that, I wouldn't think?
No, definitely not. Crowds aren't big at any of the other races that we do. World Cup or even World Champs are pretty limited. And suddenly you are competing in front of a crowd of 10,000 people deep, and you can literally feel the noise rippling through the air. And our good friend Reed Speedman came up with a beautiful chant. Kimberley, for obvious reasons, Vernon, for obvious reasons, and then Dueck. And so suddenly you've got the stadium chant of Kimberley, Vernon, Dueck, bump, bump. And so it's like you're feeling that at the top. And so one, that's overwhelming to perform in front of your friends. And then further, my mom and dad hadn't really watched me ski a whole lot. They got the highlight reels. They were for sure my biggest fans, but they only watched the highlights because they knew, I guess a part of me that was punk rock was no fucks given. And suddenly I did. I really didn't want my mom to have to see me get banged up. And, the downhill in Whistler was pretty gnarly, super high speed with a lot of variable terrain and snow conditions. So like I would have been legit scared even if my parents weren't there, but I was like, I can't let my mom see me get mangled. And so that messed with my head a little bit. And I placed fifth in the downhill, whereas in the test event the year before I'd won it. And it was mine to lose. And I just skied conservatively. And that was a tough pill for me a little bit. But at the end of the day, I'm happy that I didn't have to torment my mother any more than I did in my life. And it turned around in slalom too. It was a whole different event where I hadn't skied slalom in a while. The agenda got turned upside down because of bad weather. And so 30 days without any training in slalom, I literally had no expectations. I'm like, whatever, who cares? It's slalom. It's not my bag. And turns out it was, because I ended up with the silver medal, and it certainly looks, it's good for the storybook, that's for sure. And it's a beautiful medal. Corinne Hunt, who designed the medals for Vancouver 2010, told a wonderful story of the First Nations people, and really the story of the Paralympics in her eyes and their collective storytelling was that of the Raven. And so the medal is part of this mosaic, and each medal is unique, and yet it fits into the mosaic. So you're part of something bigger. And the story of the Raven to the First Nations people on the West Coast is that it's there to rise above great adversity and see the world from a new perspective. So she obviously thought that was appropriate for the Paralympics. And I'm glad that I've got that treasure, albeit not in the downhill, which I was striving for. I'll take the plan B, which was slalom, which is pretty decent. Crazy times though, Mike, like competing in front of any crowd, crazy. Competing in front of a home crowd, wild. And I'll wrap it up with, it was healing as well, because when I broke my back in 2004, there was like this collective, and then at the same time, it felt like a bit of a collective relief when everybody saw, he's overcome some adversity, he's fulfilled this dream. And like, really, we all deal with shit in life. And I think at that point, everybody was able to let go of something a little. Because like most of the kids that I was coaching were there. Like the crowd was chock full of homies, which is so cool. And they got to see like something beyond sport. There's a level of humanity that's revealed through the Paralympic sport. And I know first and foremost, we all consider to be athletes above and beyond a disability that we live with. But it is pretty neat. Like I watch blind skiers come down the hill, Mike, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, how are you doing this? Like, you can't see. Like, I know you can't see. I hang out in the locker room with you. Like, I know you're blind, man. I'm like, how are you doing this? And so I just get blown away, and I'll use it. Not everybody loves it, but like, it's pretty inspiring to see people elevate and transcend the way they do in our sport. And I love it.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing. And with the end of the Olympics, it sounds like you have the Olympic hangover, where I'm sure you went into a depression after the injury, but it sounds like you had such a rallying crew around you that you really didn't go into a deep depression. But after the games, it's like you've achieved your goals, you got a medal, and you end up going down into the doldrums afterwards. What does that look like?
The doldrums, 100%. Paralympic hangover was exactly what it was, and I didn't see it coming at all. I had lost a goal, something to strive for and something to work towards. I'd lost a part of my identity in a sense. And for sure, that was the first time that I felt depression from my injury. And suddenly all these things that I'd overcome were a nuisance. Like doing a catheter was a problem. Doing the digital stim to relieve my bowels was a problem. And I started to fixate on that. I wasn't like, okay, that's a part of life and shit happens to all of us. It was like my whole life was like, I hate my life. I hate having to do this. And that's when I dropped deep into substance abuse, and it got pretty ugly before it got better. Lost all purpose, all meaning, all objective. And I just fixated on all the shit. And maybe I needed to, because I never really took the time to appreciate how hard it is. And so it's developed an empathy and an understanding of the situation that I'm in, and for others that are in similar situations, because there's a lot of it, as we've talked already about, kind of sucks. And I just never really gave it the value that it has. It holds. It's like there's a lot. So it got pretty dank for a while, Mike. Pretty dank.
You say for a while, but it's like you're in the X Games within a year. And I've got like a little X Games story that I'm going to share for you, because when that X Games happened, I think it was at X Games, the first one with mono skiing in it, I was the team manager at K2, and I got an email saying there was mono skiing going on. And my dumbass thinks mono skiing is mono skiing. Like,
yeah.
So I email McConkey and I email Seth Morrison, and I'm like, hey guys, I know you guys have done this before, and this is the opportunity for you guys to walk away with a gold medal at the X Games because there's a monoski event. And then I had to email them a couple days later, like, hey guys, this is actually like an adaptive event, and I'm sorry to even email you that because that was a big mistake on my part. But how did the X Games experience compare to the para experience for you?
Oh my God, that's amazing. I wish I could have seen the look on their face as they contemplated being on a monoski. Like two legends, two heroes for me, and I'd just love to see them read that email. Monoski, that sounds ridiculous. I'm sure McConkey was all over it.
Yeah.
I've never met Seth, so I have no idea how he'd react, but I digress. It was amazing, and it felt fully inclusive and fully welcoming for all athletes, snowboard, ski, sled, and the monoski that we were doing. And I felt more included and more a part of a sports for whatever like event than I ever have before. Like the Paralympics, super dope, but there is a difference. There's the Olympics and the Paralympics. They happen at different times. There's different players in the games. There's different venues that we use for the most part. And so I loved that inclusivity at the X Games, and I was just a part of a big rock and roll show. And obviously it's a whole different experience, right? Like the skier cross is super challenging, and it took that ability to read terrain as a big part of it, that punk rock, let's go, and if we blow up, who cares kind of mentality. And I definitely was happy to go for it, and it worked out really well. My first time at the X Games, I came out on top. And then it was just like, I was hooked, obviously, just like being around all the athletes. The monoski cross was Sunday at 3:00, and then Sean White and the half pipe snowboard was at 4:00. So the bottom of the village was chock full of people, and they're like looking stage right, monoskis come down, woo! Stage left, they're over at the half pipe, woo! And it's like, and then we just got front row seats to watch the half pipe and watch all those snowboarders do their thing on a Sunday afternoon. And then old Mike Douglas gave me a call a little later on in the evening as I was beginning celebrations, and he's like, bro, do you want to come to this cool party? I'm like, dude, that'd be great, man. Like, no problem. And so he sends me this number, and you call the number, and all you do is give him an address, and the black car shows up and takes you into the mountains. And we went to this party where it was the Target party with Dumont and Sean White. But then Tom Morello was there.
Rage?
Yes. And the Night Watchman. And funny enough, I was listening to the Night Watchman as my warm-up, and then like throughout the day. And then I told Douglas this because like I came a bit late, and he was just wrapping his set, and I'm like, oh my God, dude, Mike, you'll never believe this. And so, of course, he goes over to Tom and says, Tom, that guy over there, dude, he's a big fan, and he was listening to your jam all day. And then he went off and won the skier cross. And so Tom comes up. He's like, is this true? I'm like, yeah, dude. He's like, let me play a set. What are your favorite tracks?
No
so I gave him a
way.
few off of the Night Watchman, and he just like kept jamming. I was like, oh my God. And then the next day at the airport, we're all just feeling the effects of a good night that lasted until the sun came up. And it got snowed in, so it wasn't an easy departure. And then Tom sees me at the airport. He's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Kind of dismisses himself from one group. He's like, man, can I get a picture of you with that medal of yours? He's like, it's a fun night last night, and I just definitely want to remember meeting you, dude. And I'm like, Rage Against the Machine and the Night Watchman. And of course, like, I almost would say that was my first album, was Rage self-titled, but actually CNC Music Factory was my first album, but my parents threw it in the garbage because it had a swear word in it. So they would have probably been much better to let me like rock out to CNC Music Factory. Because then when I did get my hands on Rage, it changed everything. Like NoFX, Pennywise, Rage Against the Machine. I was definitely enjoying the core ski culture in the 90s for sure.
That's amazing, man. And so you take the gold at X there, but screw the contests. What puts you on the global map outside of the ski world is your award-winning documentary that everybody should see, The Freedom Chair. Mike Douglas, you just referenced, he's the producer and director of it. And I think the original idea is to tell your story of injury to redemption through racing. But what people talk about is the backflip. That made news around the world. How did that thing all come to fruition?
It's kind of really from that X Games party that Dougie invited me to. I think we started to play with the idea of there was more to it than ski racing in the X Games. And my dream was always to film a segment and be a pro skier. And so he kind of like stewed on that for a minute, and then came up with the idea to do probably like a 3-minute webisode, because that's when Solomon Free Ski TV was just being born. And he started to interview, and it went really well because I was like, this is the Godfather in my living room. So I gave him what I would say is a fairly compelling interview. And then we went out and did some backcountry, and always the athlete, I'm pretty critical of my segment there. Like it was good, but I definitely felt like I could have skied better. But he did his editing wizardry and put together that seggy, and it turned out well. And in that Freedom Chair kind of window, we talked about doing the backflip, which was actually something that we entertained in the hospital. My buddy's like, dude, do you think you could freestyle on the sit ski? I'm like, yeah, man. And then I got into the sit ski and I'm like, no, man, definitely not. And 10 years later, and thanks to all the innovation of Own the Podium and Team Canada, I was able to get the sit ski pretty dialed. And so I was like, you know what, going upside down's a thing. And then I kept messing with it at Woodwards and Copper. And I wasn't super confident, but I knew it was possible. And then another Jedi with freestyle jumping came in and he's like, you know what, I think if we just change the lip on the jump and increase the angle of it, he's like, it'll be a no-brainer. In fact, you could do doubles if you wanted to. I was like, let's just start with one. So then I took that recipe to Douglas. We took it to Whistler Blackcomb. They put it in the terrain park onto the airbag for me. And so I kind of had a bit of a valet service there, and I was able to dial in the backy on the airbag that day. And when the stars aligned, and they did, it took a while, but when the stars finally aligned about a month later, we brought it onto snow. And it turned out pretty well. Like, it took a little bit of effort. I definitely took my hits, but we got it. And as you mentioned, it did kind of ripple around the world.
I mean, it puts you on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and there was so much to tell about you, but she made that whole appearance all about her and gifting you items with her name on it. Did you think that was a strange play?
I actually thought she was really kind, and I enjoyed my time with her. I thought she was pretty genuine in our conversation. I was definitely hoping for a free car, like a big fat check, like people come out that show, like, but it wasn't what it was about. I did think it was kind of funny. I've never worn the jacket or the helmet. The jacket's in the closet, the helmet's above my desk, and it's a good memento of that time. And what I really think back on is how potent that was, because within 6 months of dropping into the Ellen show, there was 500 million unique views on my story. And it wasn't my story at that point. It became the story of the adaptive sport community, and it created an awareness to like the innovation side of it, but also just the accessibility side of it as well. So it was a pretty big gift to the whole community, and it certainly was like a pretty big booster on my career for sure.
Yeah, and so she has you on for what she thinks is your coolest moment on a sit ski. But really, there's a moment that's even more important for you, I feel like. You get some epic footage at Chatter Creek, something I haven't seen a sit skier do before ever. You're crushing backcountry pow and sending just about everything. But the highlight takes it all the way back to your mogul buddy. Tell us the story of airing over Mark Abma.
Yeah, on the onset of the trip, Dougie's like, is there anything that you want to do? And I'm like, oh, buddy, wouldn't that be sick if I fucking air over Abma? And he's like, and you can see the wheels turning. He's like, if Dueck lands on Abma, that could be a game changer for Mark. And he's like, I don't want blood on my hands, so probably not. And meanwhile, Mark kind of elbows me. He's like, dude, if you see it, let's do it, man. And like day 2 or day 3 into this trip, he kind of like looks at this little drop and he's like, buddy, there it is. He's like, do you want this? And I'm like, whoo. Yeah, I do, man. He's like, all right. He's like, so Jeff Thomas and Douglas, and he's like, go down there and line it up, get when you're ready for the shot. And then like 15 minutes later, they call up and they're good. And it was easy for me. All I had to do was point it and be confident that I could land it. And that worked out. But like the snow was kind of pitted and wind blown where Mark had to go. So he had the real task of making the turn happen. And to me, that's one of the more memorable moments because there's a synergy going on there, but also just an appreciation for the level of professionalism for pro skiers to get the shot on demand is not easy. And so for me, it was just like everything lined up, and it was like my old homie I grew up with. And of all of us, he had really lived the dream, and still to this day is living the dream as a pro skier. And that was amazing. Yeah, because there was a synergy. We synced up and we did something that we both envisioned, which, pretty tight.
And then after the Freedom Chair and your 2 X Games experiences, you roll out with golds and bronzes. The next big thing is Sochi, and it was a shit show in terms of infrastructure. How was it for the para-athletes? Was it built with you guys in mind?
Yeah, I don't know. Probably not so much. Like that stuff just doesn't bother me at all. Like I just look at it as like life is going to be filled with barriers. And maybe that was one of the advantages of not making any mods at my home, is just like, it is what it is. At that moment in time, I really didn't care about that part of the conversation. I was just there to ski. And for sure, the track was pretty raw. It was upwards of 20 degrees Celsius. So I don't know, Fahrenheit, we're in the 60s now. So the snow was just completely ruined. And there were sections that were bulletproof ice from all the salting. There were sections that would go into like snow caves of like 8 feet. And so there's no base in some spots. And the track itself was probably one of the more aggressive downhill tracks, even at an Olympic level. and we were running the same track. And so like that part of it was pretty hairy. And even the build up, like it's a story for another time maybe, but the build up just happened to be the right crescendo where I struggled for a long time. And then finally I started peaking literally on the doorstep to Sochi. And then that punk rock mentality came in, and it was like all or nothing. And there was nothing left on the table. I blew up 3 runs. I wish I didn't, but I did. And that's part of the package when you race. And the other 2 runs were solid with a gold and silver finish, which was, yeah, pretty awesome.
So you achieved the goal of a gold medal, and it's the first time that you're going to hear the Canadian national anthem in your honor. How special of a moment is it? Is it one of those things where you just think back to every single person that's helped you get to where you were at that point, and it's just like emotions for you finally come out?
It was a mixed bag, actually, and I wish it was just that and only that. I certainly was looking through the crowd, seeing a lot of the direct support staff that was there. I was thinking back home to all the freestyle families, my family, Lacey, our daughter Nova, who was only 6 months at the time. There was certainly like a flood of the people that had sacrificed so much to afford me that opportunity, and that filled my heart up. But at the same time, there was this big, what now, right? Like I hit that target, and I knew this was the end of the road for me in ski racing. Like it was a bit of a swan song. So like nice to end on a good note, but it was kind of also a bit of a ripple to what happened in Vancouver. Is like, okay, like so much of my life has been built around this. And I just knew deep down inside that taking this level of risk and being a dad, it just didn't add up for me. I'm like, it's not all about me anymore. And so I needed to think about things differently. So there was a little bit of a, there was the acknowledgement, recognition, and gratitude. And there's a little bit of the, okay, now I've actually got to figure out kind of it was multi-climatic until we went and partied with the Austrians at the Austria House, and we tore that place down. And then it was all good, all celebrations all the way until the sun came up. And like, I just got to like frame it. This is an old cabin from like 500 years ago in Austria. They bought land in Sochi. They transplanted the lodge, and they use it for the Olympics. They use it for the Paralympics. And this was the last night of the games. So they literally the chef was getting rid of all the food, and the bartender was getting rid of all the booze, and they were going to dismantle the next day. So we literally were able to tear the walls off. It was awesome.
That is fantastic. And I think a great place to stop this interview and to jump into the final part of the podcast, which is one of my favorite parts. It's called Inappropriate Questions, and you know all about it because you've asked them before. I was able to get a very important person in your life. I went with a guy who's experienced a life-altering injury. He's one of my favorite people in the entire world. He started the High Fives Foundation. We've talked about him a bunch. I'm talking about Roy Tuscany. And are you ready to get question number 1 from Roy?
I put my seatbelt on. Roy's an intelligent man and knows me pretty well, so this could go any which way. Roy, thank you for saying yes. Let's see what you got.
Question number 1, Josh Dueck. What is the difference between sunburning your arm and sunburning your third arm?
Oh, no, but that means that we used to tell all sorts of stories late in the night. And at one point in time, when I was just after I graduated high school, I ended up getting right pickled. I smashed way too much booze, and I ended up passing out for almost 3 days. And so I passed out around Friday at midnight, and I wasn't recovered until Sunday at about 6 p.m. And somewhere in there, I had stripped off all my clothes, and I had sunburnt my junk, and it stayed pretty red for about 3 years. The burn didn't fade for a while because that part of my anatomy hadn't really seen a lot of sun till that point. And where the sun don't shine is a thing. And when the sun does hit it, it was pretty bad.
You know, I usually don't tell stories about myself, but with that one, I'm going to tell one. I was at a homecoming in high school, and the girl that I was at homecoming with said that I should go to the bathroom and grab some lotion. So I did, and we did our thing that night. And I wake up the next morning and I look next to the bed, and it was tanning lotion. And for about 3 years, I had a tan as well.
Oh my goodness. Oh, wow.
Yeah, thought I would share that with you. I will go with Roy's second inappropriate question.
Question number 2, Josh. Question number 2 is going to go along the lines of, if you and your wife, Lacey, were to sit at a table together and go beer for beer, who is going to win and who will still be coherent at the end when the victor is claimed?
Okay, it's been a long time since Lacey and I have sat down and shared a few beverages. There's no question I practice way more. I put in the mileage, and I should definitely be the champ, but she has got this innate capacity where booze doesn't really affect her the way it affects a lot of people. And, let's go back to that party at the X Games with Tom Morello and all those other amazing human beings. She definitely put a lot of people under the table, and she rarely parties, rarely on a blue moon. But when she does, it's a force to be reckoned with.
All right. So she can drink you under the table if she wants. Is that what I'm getting out of that?
Oh, yeah. Zero questions.
All right. We're going to go with Roy's final inappropriate question. This one, not as inappropriate, and I will cue it up right now.
And then question number 3, Josh, because really you are not an inappropriate man. You are one of the most professional, one of the most stand-up and amazing humans I've ever gotten to meet in my life. And one of the best pieces of advice I've ever got was from your daughter. And I'd love if you could share what is that piece of advice with all the listeners here, because it is appropriate advice and not inappropriate advice.
All right, we're going to finish this one on a positive note.
This is great. I love so much about this that I'm a stand-up guy, Roy. I love that. I love that you bring my daughter into the fold. And the advice that we gave to her when she was about 2 and we continue to reinforce, and she often reminds me, and I need the reminder, a simple adage of listen, be kind, and have fun. And if, as a parent, we can really instill that with Noves to be her ethos and her true north, then I feel like we've done a pretty reasonable job. Listening now more than ever, how important is that? Being kind, well, we all know that kindness becomes kindness. And then having fun, right? Like one of my favorite sayings was Trenton Painter, and he's like, I have fun for the sake of having fun. And it's just as simple as that. So listen, be kind, have fun. And Roy, thank you for reminding me and sharing with our audience that powerful adage and ethos. And it's something that Nova, we've instilled well enough that she always reminds me, Dad, I think you need to have some more fun. I'm like, okay. Dad, are you listening carefully? I'm like, oh, probably not. And be kind. I appreciate every reminder I can get because I'm a bit of a stern, stoic disciplinarian sometimes, and being kind is not a natural state for me. So it's nice of Roy to think that maybe it is, but it takes effort. And it's something that we can all accomplish if we put our mind to it, that's for sure.
Well, those are inappropriate questions, and I have to say that you're an inspiration, man. I mean, given you had this injury, but regardless of the injury, just the way that you talk and the things that you say, it's like you get life on a different level than a lot of people. And where you might not think you're kind and you're a disciplinarian, well, I don't see that because you're not disciplining me at all. All I see is a dude who's got such a level head and really understands what's important in life. And I thank you for your time, and I appreciate you sharing all the things that aren't even comfortable to share, but you have no problems doing it because they're messages that everyone needs to hear. And I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you as the chef de mission at the Paralympics.
Merci beaucoup, Mike Powell. It's been a treat for me. I thank you for having me. And honestly, I've been wanting to engage with you on the podcast for a long time, so it seems like now is the perfect time for it. Thank you for the great questions and the good work you do. I enjoy listening.
So that was time with Josh Dueck. And what can you say about the guy other than he's just an incredible man with a roller coaster of a life? He was dealt a shitty hand that could have been avoided, but you know what? Maybe that's what was supposed to happen. Like Josh was supposed to be on podiums, and when he couldn't afford to make that happen when he was able-bodied, he suffered a horrific injury that changed him completely, but it also put him back in a competitive space that he would never have been in if he was walking. And while I'm sure Josh wished the narrative was a little different, you won't ever hear him say it. He's more of a badass than most people I have on the show. I mean, everyone on this show has athletic gifts other than myself, but the mental toughness of Josh Dueck is a complete another level that I will never totally understand, and Canada is lucky to have them as their Paralympic chef this year. That's the podcast. At this point, it's time for the review of the week, and it comes from TK on the Island, and it's a 5-star review titled Mark Abma Episode. Here's the review. The Abma Episode 1 is awesome. You never know what to expect after watching all the MSP films and reading the articles, but Abma sure seems as cool as he is in the films. And Mike, thank you for so succinctly and accurately describing the current terrible situation at Stevens Pass this year, and last year too. I sure wish a solution to wrestle Stevens away from Vail would be easy. Maybe convince Seattle's tech titans to fund making Stevens a non-profit like Mount Spokane, and send Vail back to Denver. Well, TK on the Island, it would be amazing if we could send Vail back to Denver, but I don't know how to make that happen at this point. We are so far along the lines in this thing that they've got their grips on just about every state in the country, and they're ruining the experience everywhere, except for a few of their A-list resorts. So what is the solution? I have no idea other than complaining about it. And is that good for anything? Probably not, but you know what? I think it needs to be talked about, and I speak to a lot of people, and this needs to be on the top of people's minds so they know where to spend their money next year and where not to spend their money next year. And if you want the best experience, to me, it's going to the mom and pop resorts. It's going to those ski areas. I go to the summit at Snoqualmie and I love it. Sure, they're owned by Boyne Resorts, but you know what they do? They communicate everything that's going on whenever there's issues very well, and they create a great ski experience. When they were getting overcrowded, they decided to make the Icon Pass holders who had privilege to go to the summit, they made them start making reservations. I've never had to make a reservation skiing at the summit because they value their pass holders, and that's what's important. I also like the other mountains, like the Mission Ridges and the White Passes. They're all so much fun and a different experience than you'll get from the big guys. So my solution is go elsewhere. And that's all I've got for you right now. I want to thank you for that review. And when you email me at mike@thepowellmovement.com, you're going to get yourself a free beanie. For anybody else that'd like to get a free beanie, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is submit a review on iTunes, and I'm going to tell you how to do it right now. First, hit the podcast icon on your iPhone. Second, search for the Powell Movement. And even if you already subscribe to the podcast, you still need to search for the Powell Movement. Third, click my logo. Fourth, scroll down to where you see the stars are. Fifth, give me a star rating and review. If I read your review on the show, you'll email me with your info and you will get a beanie. If you're outside of the US, I won't ship a beanie to you. And it's not because I don't like foreign countries. I love them, but they're expensive to ship to and they require a lot of paperwork. So if I read your review and you're not from the US, you give me the address of one of your US friends and I'll ship them a beanie and they can do whatever they want with it. Finally, I want to thank you so much for listening and ask you to please support my amazing sponsors who make this happen. They are Stanley, Alpine Vans, Elon Skis, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.